The Crimson Empire and the Nova Dominion had been enemies for 300 years, and everyone in the galaxy knew it would stay that way forever. Or, at least that was what they all believed, until the day the human ship arrived. Their territories stretched across thousands of star systems, like two giant snakes wrapped around the same tree, each waiting for the other to make a wrong move, each ready to strike if given the chance, but neither willing to start the war that would destroy them both. Between their borders sat a place called the Neutral Corridor, a long stretch of dead and empty star systems where no one lived and no one traveled. A buffer zone that kept the two empires from touching each other directly. And it was into this forbidden space that the human vessel dropped out of faster than light travel on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The ship was called the Adamantine Resolve, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Nearly 4 kilometers of dark metal and sharp angles that looked like it had been designed by someone who expected to fight God himself and wanted to win. There were no smooth curves on its hull, no elegant lines that spoke of advanced civilization, just hard edges and layered armor and so many weapons that counting them would take a full day. And the ship sat in the empty system like a predator waiting for prey. The humans aboard had no idea where they were or what they had stumbled into. And this was because Earth had only discovered faster than light travel 18 months ago, making the Adamantine Resolve the first human ship to travel beyond their own solar system. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge and looked at the stars through the main viewport, feeling a mix of wonder and pride that made her heart beat faster, because she was seeing suns that no human had ever seen before, worlds that no human had ever visited. And the weight of that responsibility sat heavy on her shoulders. She was 42 years old, with short gray hair and dark eyes that had seen too many wars back on Earth. And she had been chosen for this mission because she was the best captain the United Earth Navy had ever produced. A woman who had never lost a battle and never would. The ship carried 3,000 crew members who had volunteered for this journey, knowing they might never return home. Brave men and women who believed that humanity needed to reach for the stars or die trying. And every single one of them trusted Captain Vasquez with their lives. But their peaceful exploration was about to become something much more dangerous deep in the Crimson Empire. Sensors detected the unknown vessel within minutes of its arrival, and alarm signals began flashing across military installations as officers scrambled to understand what they were seeing. Admiral Crickstill of the Crimson 7th Fleet was eating his evening meal when the report reached him, and he nearly choked on his food when he saw the sensor readings, because the ship in the Neutral Corridor was massive and armed beyond anything in his experience. He was an insectoid creature with 4 eyes and a body covered in red chitin, standing nearly 3 meters tall with mandibles that could crush steel. And he had commanded fleets for 60 years without ever feeling fear. He felt it now. The unknown vessel had weapon systems that made no sense to his tactical officers. Projectile launchers that should have been primitive but were scaled up to terrifying sizes, and energy signatures that suggested power generation beyond what the Crimson Empire could produce. He ordered his fastest ships to investigate immediately across the void in Nova Dominion space. Commander Selith received similar reports and had similar reactions, her aquatic instincts screaming at her to swim away from the threat as fast as possible, even though she was standing on the bridge of her flagship. Her people had evolved from ocean predators on a water world, and they had never lost their ability to sense danger before it arrived. And right now, every cell in her body was telling her that the unknown ship was the most dangerous thing she had ever encountered. She sent her own scout fleet to investigate, knowing that the Crimson Empire would do the same, and hoping that the two forces would not start shooting at each other when they arrived back on the Adamantine Resolve. The sensor officer suddenly sat up straight in her chair and said words that would change human history forever. Captain, I am detecting multiple vessels approaching our position from 2 different directions. Vasquez turned away from the viewport and walked to the sensor station, her boots clicking on the metal floor as she moved. And she looked at the display with eyes that had analyzed 1,000 battle situations. "How many ships?" she asked. The officer swallowed hard before answering. 53 total, Captain. And they appear to be from 2 different civilizations. Based on their design patterns, Vasquez felt her heart skip a beat as she realized what this meant. Because humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe, and now they had their answer. Delivered in the form of 53 alien warships, heading straight for them. She had trained her entire life for moments like this one. Every simulation and wargame and sleepless night studying tactics had been preparing her for first contact with alien life. But she had hoped it would involve handshakes and gifts rather than weapons pointed at her ship. "Are they hostile?" she asked. The sensor officer checked her readings again, and her face went pale. "They are powering weapons, Captain." All 53 of them. Vasquez stood perfectly still for 3 seconds as her mind processed this information and calculated her options. And then she made a decision that would echo through Galactic History Sound General Quarters. She said in a voice as calm as still water, "All hands to battle stations. Charge all weapons, but do not fire unless fired upon. We came here in peace, and we will try to keep it that way." The alarms began to wail throughout the ship as 3,000 humans ran to their stations, ready to fight or die in the black emptiness between stars. And Captain Elena Vasquez walked back to her command chair and sat down with the quiet confidence of someone who had never lost. She looked at the approaching fleets on her tactical display and she smiled. Because fear was a luxury she could not afford, and besides, the adamantine resolve had been built to handle situations exactly like this one. Whatever happened next, humanity would face it standing tall. The 2 alien fleets arrived at the same time, and something remarkable happened. Something that neither empire would have believed possible. Just 1 hour earlier, they stopped shooting at each other for 300 years. The Crimson Empire and the Nova Dominion had been enemies, and their ships had fired on each other whenever they met. But now both fleets held their fire because the unknown vessel demanded their complete attention. Admiral Crickstal studied the human ship through magnified displays and felt his 4 eyes narrow with confusion and growing fear. Because nothing about this vessel made sense to him. The hull was made of layered steel and titanium, reinforced with what appeared to be raw iron, materials that his people had stopped using thousands of years ago. And yet the construction was so thick and so heavy that his weapons officers were not sure their guns could penetrate it. The weapons were even more disturbing. Chemical-based projectile systems that launched solid metal at incredible speeds. Primitive technology that should have been laughable, except that there were hundreds of them covering every surface of the ship. That vessel has armed everything, his tactical officer reported with obvious nervousness. Every centimeter of its hull appears to be either a weapon or armor. "I have never seen anything like it." Crickstal clicked his mandibles together in a gesture that meant worried agreement, and he wondered what kind of species would build something so brutally focused on destruction across the void. On her own flagship, Commander Selioth was reaching similar conclusions, her predator instincts screaming danger so loudly that she had to grip her command chair to stop herself from ordering a retreat. The human ship radiated threat the way a star radiated heat, not through any aggressive action, but simply through its existence. And she understood with perfect clarity that this vessel had been built by beings who expected the universe to try to kill them. Both fleets attempted communication at the same time, sending standard first contact packages on every frequency they could think of. And they waited with growing tension for a response. The human answer came as an open broadcast that both fleets could hear. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth vessel. Adamantine resolve. We are on a peaceful exploration mission. Please identify yourselves and your intentions. Peaceful. The words seemed almost absurd, coming from a ship that carried enough firepower to destroy a small planet. And both alien commanders found themselves unsure how to respond. The standoff lasted for 17 minutes, while diplomats on both sides tried to figure out what to say. And during those 17 minutes, a young Crimson officer made a terrible mistake. His name was Lieutenant Raxus, and he was eager to prove himself to his superiors. Or perhaps he misread his targeting computer. Or perhaps he simply panicked at the sight of the monstrous human vessel. But whatever the reason, he pressed the firing button. A single energy bolt lanced across the void and struck the adamantine resolve on its port side, leaving a scorch mark on the heavy armor, but causing no real damage. Every being in both fleets held their breath on the bridge of the adamantine resolve. Captain Vasquez watched the damage report scroll across her screen, and she felt something cold settle into her chest. Not fear, but rather disappointment that first contact was going to end this way. She had hoped for better, but she had prepared for worse. Open a channel to all ships, she ordered her communications officer, and when the channel was open, she spoke in a voice that carried across the void like a blade. Made of ice, you have fired upon a vessel of the United Earth Navy, she said. You have 30 seconds to stand down and power off all weapons, or we will interpret this as an act of war and respond accordingly. Admiral Crystal heard these words and felt genuine terror for the first time in 60 years of military service, because the human captain spoke not like someone who was afraid, but like someone who was already calculating how to win. He opened his mouth to order his fleet to comply, but before he could speak, the countdown ended 28 seconds after her warning. Captain Vasquez gave a simple order: fire. The adamantine resolve had been built with weapons that human engineers called mass accelerators, magnetic rails that could launch tungsten projectiles at a significant fraction of the speed of light. And 4 of these weapons fired simultaneously at the Crimson cruiser that had attacked them. The ship that Lieutenant Vraxis had served on simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a proud warship of the Crimson 7th Fleet, and the next moment it was an expanding cloud of atoms and debris, destroyed so completely that there was nothing left to recover. The engagement lasted less than 1 second. Every other ship in both fleets immediately powered down their weapons and began broadcasting surrender signals. 52 vessels giving up without a fight because their crews had just watched a single human ship do something impossible. Captain Vasquez stood on her bridge and looked at what she had done, and she felt no joy in it, only a heavy sadness that first contact had required bloodshed. But she was not finished yet. Open a channel to all ships again, she said. And when the channel was open, her voice had changed from cold steel to something warmer. We did not come here looking for a fight, she said, but we will not allow ourselves to be attacked without response. That said, we bear no ill will toward any of you, and we would like to offer assistance to any vessels that need repairs or medical attention. The aliens could not believe what they were hearing, because the humans had just demonstrated the ability to destroy them all, and now they were offering to help. Admiral Crystal accepted the offer because he did not know what else to do. And over the next 6 hours, human engineers and medics traveled to damaged alien ships and helped fix systems and treat wounded crew members. The humans worked alongside beings that looked nothing like them, insectoid Crimson warriors and aquatic Nova soldiers, and they did so with genuine kindness that confused everyone who witnessed it. When the adamantine resolve finally departed to continue its mission, it left behind 52 alien ships crewed by beings who had learned something important about humanity. These strange new creatures were absolutely terrifying in battle, but generous and kind in peace. And that combination was more frightening than anything either empire had ever encountered. the galaxy would never be the same. News of what happened in the empty star system spread through both empires faster than light itself could travel, carried by quantum communication, relays and whispered conversations, and terrified reports from the officers who had witnessed. A single human warship had destroyed a Crimson cruiser in less than 1 second. A single human warship had forced 52 vessels from 2 hostile empires to surrender without any further fighting. A single human warship had then offered medical help and engineering assistance to the same beings it had just defeated. The intelligence agencies of both empires went into overdrive trying to learn everything they could about this new species called humanity. And what they discovered made the situation even more complicated and frightening. Humans came from a small blue planet orbiting an average yellow star in an unremarkable part of the galaxy, a world they called Earth that should not have all produced anything special. The history of that world was unlike anything in galactic records. Humans had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times through global warfare, conflicts so terrible that they had developed weapons capable of ending all life on their planet. And yet somehow they had survived. They had fought 2 wars that involved nearly every nation on their world, wars that killed tens of millions of their own kind. And they called these conflicts World War I and World War II, as if they expected there might be more. They had created nuclear weapons and pointed them at each other for decades, living under the constant threat of mutual destruction. And instead of using those weapons to conquer each other, they had simply learned to live with the fear. The intelligence analysts could not understand this at all, because any sane species would have unified under a single government long before reaching such a dangerous point. But humans had somehow maintained hundreds of separate nations while sitting on enough weapons to burn their world to ash, and then they had built the adamantine resolve. This ship had been designed as an exploration vessel meant to find new worlds and make peaceful contact with alien life. But the humans had built it for war anyway, because as one intercepted transmission explained, you never know what might be out there. They had been preparing to fight the universe before they even knew the universe could fight back. Emperor Krolax of the Crimson Empire received these intelligence reports in his private chambers, and he read them 3 times before he fully believed what he was seeing. He was old for his species, nearly 200 years old, with chitin that had faded from bright red to dark burgundy. And he had ruled his empire for 90 of those years through a combination of wisdom and ruthlessness, but he had never faced anything like this before. The humans are insane, his chief advisor said as they discussed the reports. Their entire history is violence and destruction, and yet they claim to want peace. Krolax clicked his mandibles thoughtfully and considered this assessment. Now, he said finally, they're not insane. There's something far more dangerous. They are survivors. He understood now what made humans so frightening, because they had faced extinction over and over again at their own hands, and they had always found a way to continue. And that kind of resilience was more valuable than any weapon across the galaxy. In the crystalline halls of the Nova Dominion, High Sovereign Nethrias was reaching similar conclusions. She was ancient by her people's standards. Her scales faded to pale silver with age, and she had guided her dominion through 3 major wars and countless smaller conflicts. The humans worry me, she admitted to her council. Not because they are strong, though they clearly are, but because I cannot predict what they will do. Her admiral spoke up, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had not been at the battle. They destroyed 1 ship, he said. Our combined fleets could overwhelm them if we worked together. Mithrius turned her cold eyes toward him, and he fell silent immediately. You missed the point entirely, she said. They destroyed 1 ship, and then they helped the survivors. They demonstrated both the ability to kill and the desire to heal. And that combination is not something we know how to fight. She dismissed her council and sat alone in her throne room thinking about the future. And she realized that everything had changed for 300 years. The Cold War between her dominion and the Crimson Empire had been the central fact of galactic politics. The great game that everyone played and everyone understood. But now there was a new player at the table. A species that did not follow any of the rules because they had written their own rules through centuries of brutal experience. She made a decision that would have been unthinkable 1 week earlier. Open a communication channel to Emperor Krolax. She ordered, direct and private. Tell him that the High Sovereign wishes to speak about the human situation. Several hours later, the two most powerful beings in the known galaxy were speaking face to face for the first time in history. Their images projected across the void through quantum entanglement. We have a problem, Krolax said without any formal greeting. Mithrius allowed herself a small smile that showed her sharp teeth. We have an opportunity, she replied, or a catastrophe, depending entirely on what we choose to do next. They spoke for a long time, these ancient enemies, and they found that they agreed on more than they had expected. Neither of them wanted the humans as enemies, because a species capable of building something like the Adamantine Resolve would be a terrible foe. Neither of them could allow the humans to ally with the other empire either, because that would tip the balance of power fatally. We must meet with them together, Krolax said finally. Present a united front and show them that we can work together when necessary. Mithrius nodded her ancient head in agreement. In the same system where they first appeared, she suggested. It seems fitting somehow, and so for the first time in 300 years, the leaders of the Crimson Empire and the Nova Dominion agreed to meet in person, brought together by their shared fear of a species that had only been part of the galactic community for a few short days. Neither of them knew what would happen next, but both of them suspected that the future would belong to whoever could win the friendship of the terrifying, generous, violent, and kind creatures called humans. The message arrived on the Adamantine Resolve 3 days after the battle, transmitted through relay stations that the humans did not even know existed, and Captain Vasquez read it with a mixture of surprise and caution. The rulers of both the Crimson Empire and the Nova Dominion were requesting permission to board her ship for diplomatic discussions, and they wanted to do so together, which her intelligence officers told her was completely unprecedented. She considered refusing, because bringing 2 alien leaders onto her vessel seemed like an excellent way to create a hostage situation. But her orders from Earth were clear: make friends if possible. She had been told before departing, humanity needs allies in the universe, and you are our best chance to find them. So she accepted the invitation and spent 2 days preparing her ship for the most important meeting in human history. The conference room was scrubbed clean and decorated with symbols of Earth, flags from every nation, and photographs of human achievements, things that might help the aliens understand who they were dealing with. She chose her crew carefully for the meeting, selecting officers who could remain calm under pressure and who would represent humanity well. And she made sure that every single one of them understood what was at stake. If this goes wrong, she told them, it will mean war with 2 galactic empires. So please be on your best behavior. They promised they would try. The day of the meeting arrived, and 2 separate shuttles docked with the Adamantine Resolve, one carrying Emperor Krolax and his guards, the other carrying High Sovereign Mithrius and her attendants. Captain Vasquez met them both in the docking bay, standing straight and tall in her dress uniform, with her medals gleaming on her chest. Emperor Krolax was even more impressive in person than she had expected, a towering insectoid creature covered in dark red chitin that gleamed under the lights, with 4 eyes that seemed to see everything at once, and mandibles that could probably crush her skull without effort. High Sovereign Mithrius moved with fluid grace, despite wearing a suit that kept her skin moist in the dry ship air. her silver scales reflecting light in patterns that were almost hypnotic. And her eyes held the cold intelligence of an ancient predator. "Welcome aboard the Adamantine Resolve," Vasquez said with a formal bow. "I am Captain Elena Vasquez, and I am honored to receive you." Two alien leaders exchanged glances that suggested they were surprised by her calm demeanor. And then they followed her to the conference room where the future of three civilizations would be decided. They sat around a large table made of earth oak, humans on one side and aliens on the other. And for a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Emperor Krolax broke the silence with a question that had clearly been bothering him. "Why did you build this ship?" he asked. "Your species has only had faster than light travel for a short time, but this vessel is designed for war. Why would you create something like this for exploration?" Vasquez had been expecting this question, and she answered it. "Honestly, because we learned a long time ago that the universe does not care about our survival," she said. "Our world has tried to kill us many times through ice ages and plagues and asteroids. And we have tried to kill ourselves even more often than that. So when we finally reached the stars, we decided to be ready for whatever we found." Mithrias leaned forward with obvious interest. "Your intelligence files say that you developed weapons capable of destroying your entire civilization," she said. "Nuclear devices that could have burned your world to ash, yet you never used them." "Why not?" Vasquez smiled sadly and shook her head. "We came close more than once," she admitted. "There were moments when everything hung by a thread and only luck or wisdom or maybe just stubbornness kept us from pressing the button. But we survived because deep down most humans want to live in peace. We are capable of terrible violence, but we do not enjoy it." The two alien rulers looked at each other again, and some unspoken communication passed between them. Krolax spoke next, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of experience. "Your vessel changes everything," he said. "A single ship of your design could tip the balance of power between our empires. We need to know where humanity stands. Will you ally with the Crimson Empire or the Nova Dominion, or will you try to play us against each other?" It was a direct question, and it deserved a direct answer. "We did not want to ally with of you against the other," Vasquez said. "Earth has had enough of war, and we did not come out here to find new enemies. We came looking for knowledge and friendship and proof that we are not alone in the universe." "Then what do you want?" Mithrias asked. Vasquez stood up and walked to the viewport that showed the stars burning cold and bright against the endless black. "We want peace," she said simply. The word hung in the recycled air like something fragile and precious, and neither alien rulers seemed to know what to do with it. "You built a warship for peace?" Krolax asked with obvious skepticism. Vasquez turned back to face them, and her eyes were steady and certain. "We built a warship because peace must be strong enough to defend itself," she explained. "We hoped we would never have to fire these weapons, but we wanted to be ready if we did. That is the human way. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst." She walked back to the table and placed her hands flat on the oak surface. "Your empires have been at each other's throats for 300 years," she said. "That ends one of two ways. Either one of you conquers the other, or you both learn to share the galaxy. But I am offering you a third option." "What option?" Mithrias asked. "Neither of you wins," Vasquez said. "Neither of you loses. Instead, you work together because there is something bigger than both of you now. And that something wants to be your friend rather than your enemy." The two rulers sat in silence for a long time, considering her words and everything they implied. "We would need to trust each other," Krolax said slowly. "After 300 years of hatred, yes, you would," Vasquez agreed. "But you would also have humanity standing beside you, ready to help maintain the peace. And if either side breaks the agreement, they will have to deal with us." It was a threat wrapped in an offer of friendship, delivered with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly how much power she held. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. Krolax and Mithrias looked at each other one more time, and then they both began to speak about what a lasting peace might actually look like. Real negotiations had begun. The negotiations lasted 18 months, and they were the hardest 18 months that any of the three civilizations had ever experienced. There were moments when everything nearly collapsed, when old hatreds flared up and diplomats walked out of meetings and warships began powering their weapons in anticipation of the conflict that everyone expected, but somehow the humans always found a way to bring everyone back to the table. Captain Vasquez, now promoted to Admiral Vasquez in recognition of her incredible diplomatic achievements, became the unofficial mediator for every dispute. Traveling between Crimson and Nova Space in the Amen, resolve and refusing to let either side give up on peace, she was helped by her crew, who had become unlikely ambassadors for humanity. Through their actions and their attitudes, there was Dr. Chun, who saved the life of a Crimson Prince when his hearts failed during a diplomatic dinner, working through the night with alien medical equipment she had never seen before and refusing to stop until he was stable. There was Chief Engineer Okonkwo, who helped Nova technicians repair their flagship's drive system after an accident, sharing human engineering secrets without hesitation because helping people in need was simply what humans did. And there was Ensign Sarah Martinez, who accidentally became a legend when she defeated a Crimson warrior in ritual combat. The warrior had challenged her as an insult, expecting the small human female to refuse or to be easily beaten. But Sarah had grown up in Mexico City, where she learned to fight in the streets before joining the Navy. She broke 2 of his arms and cracked his chitin in 7 places before the referees stopped the match. And then she helped carry him to the medical bay and stayed with him until he recovered. They became friends after that, the tiny human woman and the massive insectoid warrior, and their friendship became a symbol of what was possible between the species. But the real breakthrough came when the 3 leaders finally agreed on the terms of what would be called the Treaty of the 3 Stars. The Crimson Empire and the Nova Dominion would end their Cold War and begin working together on joint projects that would benefit both civilizations. Human observers would be stationed in both capitals to help maintain the peace and to learn about galactic civilization trade. Routes would open between all 3 powers, allowing goods and ideas to flow freely across borders that have been closed for centuries. And at the center of it all would be humanity, the newcomers who had stumbled into galactic politics and somehow become the glue holding everything together. Signing ceremony took place on a space station built specifically for the occasion, a massive structure floating in the exact center of what had once been the neutral corridor. Representatives from all 3 civilizations gathered to witness the moment when history changed forever. Thousands of beings from dozens of species, watching as Emperor Krolax and High Sovereign Mithrius and Admiral Vasquez each signed a treaty document. When it was done, Vasquez stood before the assembled crowd and gave a speech that would be remembered for generations. We did not come to your galaxy looking for power, she said. We came looking for connection, for proof that we were not alone in the endless dark. And we found something better than we ever imagined. She gestured to the Crimson and Nova delegations, standing together for the first time in 3 centuries. We found 2 great civilizations that had forgotten how to trust each other, she continued. And we found that we could help them remember, not through force, though we have that, but through patience and kindness and stubborn refusal to give up on peace. The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. Humanity has a complicated history, she admitted. We have done terrible things to each other and to our world, but we have also done incredible things. We have loved and created and dreamed of better futures. And those dreams brought us here. She smiled. And in that smile was all the hope and determination that defined her species. We are not perfect, she said, but we believe that tomorrow can be better than today if we work hard enough to make it so. And we invite you to share that belief with us. Because the universe is very large and very dark, and it is better to face it together than alone. The applause that followed shook the station walls. The adamantium resolve returned to Earth as heroes. Their mission complete beyond anyone's wildest expectations. And Admiral Vasquez was given command of the newly formed Galactic Relations Division, her crew scattered across the planet telling stories that seemed impossible but were entirely true. Inspiring a new generation of humans to reach for the stars, Earth began building more ships. Not for war, but for exploration and trade and diplomacy. Vessels that would carry human ambassadors to every corner of the galaxy. Some of those ships were armed because humans never forgot the lessons of their history. But their weapons were meant for defense rather than conquest. The other galactic powers watched these developments with great interest. The Synthesis Collective, a civilization of machine intelligences, sent envoys to discuss technology exchanges with the creative and unpredictable humans. The Thornwall Federation, an alliance of plant-based species, opened communication channels to discuss agricultural techniques and environmental science, even the Silent Ones, a species that had not spoken to outsiders in 10,000 years, transmitted a single message that reads simply, "We are watching." With interest, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one had predicted, not because humanity was the strongest, or the oldest or the wisest species, because they clearly were none of those things, but because they were something that the other species had forgotten how to be. They were stubborn optimists who refused to accept that conflict was inevitable. Dreamers who built warships for peace. Fighters who helped their enemies after the battle was over. They believed that the future could be better than the past. And they were willing to work and fight and die to make it so. And for the first time in recorded galactic history, the great powers of the cosmos looked at these strange newcomers and saw not enemies or rivals or prey. They saw hope, the human warship that had terrified two empires, had done something far more important than winning a battle. It had shown the galaxy what was possible when strength and kindness worked together, and that lesson would echo through the stars for 10,000 years. This was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning.